Once you stop chasing money, it starts chasing you. Neville Goddard taught that the very thing you run after with your hands empty is the thing that runs from you. And the moment you stop running and start assuming, it turns in the dark and comes looking for you instead. There is a verse tucked into the 6th chapter of Matthew that most people read as financial advice. And Neville read it as the whole secret of consciousness laid bare. It says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." And notice, it does not say seek money and the kingdom will be added. It says seek the kingdom first. Seek the inner state. Seek the feeling of already possessing. And the things, the money, the position, the increase, are added the way a shadow is added to a body standing in the sun, effortlessly, without struggle, because the substance came first. Neville would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? You have spent your whole life seeking the things and hoping the kingdom would follow, and reality only ever works in the other direction. The kingdom is not a place you enter later. The kingdom is your own wonderful human imagination. Awake now, claiming now, and the things are only ever added." Say it with me. I am the source of my own supply. I already possess everything I have imagined. Imagination creates my reality. Again, I am the source of my own supply. I already possess everything I have imagined. Imagination creates my reality. If this teaching is reaching you at just the right moment, subscribe now, so that tomorrow's word finds you the same way. And if something in you just went quiet and settled while you spoke those words, type the 2 words, "It's done," into the comments below, and let that be your seal. The first key is, stop asking how the money will come. This single habit, this constant reaching for the method, is the thing keeping the money at arm's length. Picture the man who checks his bank balance 5 times a day, refreshing the app, watching the number, hoping it moved. Every glance is a prayer that says, "I do not have it yet." And the state he occupies while checking is lack, and lack can only report on itself. Neville taught that the feeling is the secret, not the method, and that imagination never troubles itself with how, it simply assumes the end and lets the how arrange itself in ways the reasoning mind could never have plotted. Picture him now on a Tuesday morning, coffee going cold beside him, thumbs sliding across the screen, and notice, he is not checking to celebrate, he is checking to confirm his fear. And the moment he sees the number has not moved, his shoulders drop, and he carries that small private defeat into every conversation of his day, into the way he speaks to his own children, into the tone he takes with his own coworkers. And he never once suspects that the checking itself is the seed being planted, watered, and harvested, over and over. This is not laziness on his part, and it is not stupidity. It is simply a habit no one ever taught him to question, and you are likely not so different. You have your own version of the bank app, your own ritual of reaching for reassurance that only ever hands you back the very lack you feared. So this week, when you feel that familiar urge to check, to worry, to calculate, pause instead and ask yourself, what would I feel if this were already resolved? And manufacture that feeling on purpose. Sit in a chair and feel the relief of the bill already paid. Feel the ease in your shoulders that only comes from abundance already present. This is not pretending. This is occupying the only room in consciousness where the answer already lives. It is not that money is scarce. It is that your attention has been scarce, trained for years to search for lack and call it realism. But realism is only ever the outer report of an inner state. Change the state and the report changes with it. So this week, practice the small discipline of refusing to check the wound, refusing to press on the bruise of not enough, and instead resting, even for 2 minutes at a time, in the simple assumption, it is already done. Let that be enough. Let it be complete in itself, needing no evidence, no confirmation, no proof from the outer world to make it real. because it was already real the moment you felt it. This is the quick turn, the first loosening of the grip, and it prepares you for something deeper, because behind the habit of chasing money lies a much older habit, the habit of believing you yourself are not enough to deserve it. I stop chasing and I rest in having. The second key is, notice that money never disagrees with your self-concept. It only ever agrees with it. Neville taught that consciousness is the one and only reality, and that every outer condition, including your income, including your opportunities, is simply the self-concept given form. Picture two men working the very same job, same hours, same paycheck on paper, and yet one is passed over while the other is handed opportunities that seem to fall from nowhere. The difference was never the resume, it was the private assumption each man carried about his own worth. One walked through the door already convinced he was the kind of man money flows toward. The other convinced he had to fight for every dollar, and the outer world, which is only ever a mirror, obliged them both. This is why Neville said so plainly, "You are already that which you wish to be, and your only sin is that you doubt it." If you carry the self-concept of someone always slightly behind, the world will keep confirming that concept with uncanny precision. Not out of cruelty, but out of faithfulness. Consider the woman who negotiates her salary. One version of her walks in already feeling the quiet dignity of being worth more. Her voice does not rise. She simply states the number the way she would state her own name, and the room tends to agree. Another version of the very same woman walks in already braced for rejection, rehearsing her apology in advance, and the room, again without knowing why, agrees with her too. This is not luck. It is self-concept made visible in real time. And here is another picture worth sitting with. A landlord once raised the rent on every tenant except one. And when asked why, he said simply, "That one always pays like the money is already there, so I never think twice about her." He was not being kind, he was being accurate, describing back to her the very state she had quietly broadcast for years. So this week, catch yourself the instant you say, "I can't afford that," and quietly revise the sentence within, "I am the kind of person things come easily to," not as a hollow slogan, but as a felt, settled knowing, held the way you hold your own name. Tonight, before sleep, walk slowly through your day as though you already carried that settled worth. Feel how differently you would have answered the phone, opened the bill, spoken to a stranger. It is not the raise that must change first, and it is not the rent, or the room full of strangers deciding your worth. It is the quiet assumption underneath all of it, and once that self-concept shifts, the people and circumstances around you begin shifting with it, because I am the kind of person money moves toward. The third key is, remember that everyone connected to your money is you. Pushed out. Neville taught that the people of your world are not separate beings acting on their own private authority. They are dramatized reflections of your own assumptions, projected outward the way a dream projects a whole cast of characters who all, upon waking, turn out to have been the dreamer, the employer who signs your raise, the client who finally pays the overdue invoice, the stranger who offers the unexpected deal. None of them are outside your consciousness. They are your own assumption wearing a different face, and this is a hard teaching for the reasoning mind to accept, because the reasoning mind wants to believe that other people have their own private engines, their own moods, their own reasons that have nothing to do with you. But Neville taught that the outer world has no engine of its own at all. It is a mirror and only a mirror. And a mirror has never once in the history of mirrors initiated a single expression. It only ever returns the face turned toward it. So if the client is slow, if the employer is stingy, if the stranger seems cold and closed, look first at the assumption you have been feeding, not because you caused it through some fault, but because you caused it through consciousness, which is simply how the mirror was always built to work. Consider the woman who spent years believing that clients were slow, that people did not value her work, that money moved through everyone's hands but hers. She would tell the story often, almost proudly, as though it were simply the truth of her industry. Clients are slow. Everyone knows that. And the story hardened into fact because she kept handing it fresh feeling every single day. And one evening, tired of the story, she sat quietly, without effort, without begging heaven, and simply imagined the relief of an unexpected payment landing in her account. She felt it fully. She felt the small laugh of surprise. She felt the warmth of gratitude toward whoever sent it. She did not know who. She did not need to know who, because it is not the specific person you must control. It is the state you must occupy. And 3 days later, a client she had written off months earlier returned with a payment for work she had nearly forgotten she'd done. And notice, she did not phone him, she did not chase him, she did not even think of him directly. She simply stopped rehearsing his silence and started rehearsing her own relief. This is the mechanism made visible. The client did not change on his own. He moved because she moved first, within. This is living in the end, not waiting for the world to shift so that you can finally feel relieved, but feeling relieved first, and letting the world rearrange itself around a feeling that has already been claimed as true. Neville called this the state akin to accepting the wish already fulfilled. And he taught it plainly. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and observe the route by which your assumption is fulfilled. And see how differently that reads once you understand who the client really is. He is not an obstacle to be managed. He is you, pushed out, wearing the shape of a client, and so is the bank teller, and so is the landlord, and so is the friend who owes you a favor. Every last one of them is a character your own assumption has cast in the play, and the play always ends the way the assumption began it. Pause for a moment right now and pick one real situation, an invoice, a raise, a sale you have been hoping for, and instead of hoping, feel for 10 quiet seconds exactly what relief will feel like once it lands. Let the shoulders drop. Let the breath lengthen. Let the small private smile arrive early. Because everyone who will ever hand you money is only you, pushed out, meeting you at the door you built for them in private. And once you truly see this, you stop asking the world to be kinder and start asking your own imagination to be clearer. Because the world was never unkind. It was only ever accurate. Everyone who brings me money is only my own state, walking toward me. Now, before we go further, if you have felt these 3 keys landing and you want a structured way to walk them daily instead of remembering them only in flashes, there is a guided path built exactly for that called the 21-day reality shift. More on that shortly. Now let us continue. The 4th key is, revise the day that disappointed you before you let it settle into your record. Neville taught that revision is one of the most practical tools ever given to the imagination, because the day is not finished being written simply because the clock has moved past it. Most people treat the past as a locked door. Something fixed, something to merely accept and carry forward. But Neville taught that the past is only a state, and states can be revisited, re-entered, and reshaped in imagination just as freely as any scene you are constructing for the future. Picture the ordinary sting of an opportunity that fell through, a client who went quiet, a payment that bounced, a raise that was promised and then delayed. Most people carry that sting to bed with them, replaying it, rehearsing the injustice, feeding the very state that produced the disappointment in the first place, and by feeding it nightly, they guarantee its return tomorrow in a new disguise. Because whatever state you dwell in before sleep is the state the imagination carries forward into the following day, as though it were the seed carried in the soil overnight. Consider a man who spent an entire evening replaying an argument with a business partner over money owed, turning the words over and over, sharpening his anger, rehearsing his righteousness, and he woke the next morning already primed for conflict, already expecting to be wronged again, and the day obliged him. But Neville taught that before sleep, You may sit quietly and revise the scene, not analyze it, not justify it, simply see it differently. Replay the conversation as you wished it had gone. Feel the client's message arrive with good news instead of silence. Feel the check clear instead of bounce. Feel the partner's voice turn warm and fair instead of cold. This is not denial of what happened in the room. It is the refusal to let what happened in the room become the seed of tomorrow. Revision does not pretend the day was different. It insists that the day is not yet finished having its meaning decided. And imagination, impressed nightly with the revised version, will produce a tomorrow shaped by the revision rather than the wound. So tonight, before you sleep, choose one disappointment from today. However small, sit quietly, close your eyes, and simply live it again the way you wish it had gone. Feel it, briefly, sincerely, and let it go. This small habit, repeated night after night, quietly rewires what kind of day tomorrow is permitted to be. And in time you will notice that the very people who once seemed to disappoint you begin arriving differently. Because you have stopped rehearsing the wound and started rehearsing the healing, I revise tonight so tomorrow is already healed. Subscribe now so that each new key finds you the moment it is released. This teaching is meant to be walked daily, not remembered once and forgotten. The fifth key is: enter the state akin to sleep, and let persistence do what force could never do. And this key unfolds in several turns, so walk through them with me slowly. First, consider what Neville meant by the state akin to sleep. He did not mean unconsciousness. He meant a drowsy, loosened, undefended state, the moments before sleep takes you fully, when the body grows heavy and still, when the arguing, reasoning mind has finally stopped defending what is and allowed itself simply to feel what could be. Neville taught that in this drowsy borderland, the imagination is at its most impressionable, like wet clay rather than dried stone. And whatever feeling you introduce there sinks deep and takes root without the mind's usual objections standing guard at the door. Notice the image chosen for this key. The crescent moon resting over a sleeping figure, because the moon does not strain to pull the tide toward the shore. It simply hangs there, quiet, faithful, and the ocean obeys without being asked twice. This is what your assumption is meant to become, not a demand shouted at the universe, but a quiet gravity exerted from the drowsy place within you. So each night, before sleep fully arrives, feel the specific scene that implies your wish is already fulfilled. Not a vague wish for more money floating like mist, but one small, sensory scene. The weight of a phone in your hand as you read a message you have longed for. The sound of your own quiet laugh of relief. The feel of a pen signing a check you are finally free to write. Consider a man who had spent 3 years anxious about his small business, watching the register at closing with a knot of dread every single night, and one evening, instead of replaying the day's shortfall, he lay in bed and imagined counting a stack of bills at closing, feeling their thickness between his fingers, feeling the satisfied breath of a person who has more than enough. He did not argue with the actual number that night. He simply let the imagined scene grow more real to his senses than the real one, and he carried that same drowsy feeling into sleep for many nights running, not once, but as a quiet nightly return. Consider also a woman waiting on a check that seemed to move slower each week it did not arrive. Watching the mailbox from her kitchen window, the way a person watches a pot that refuses to boil. Until one night she stopped watching the window in her mind, and instead pictured the envelope already in her hand, felt the paper's slight weight, felt her thumb sliding it open, felt the ordinary joy of seeing her own name printed beside the amount. She held that feeling only a few minutes before sleep, but nightly, and she noticed the watching during the day grew quieter almost on its own, because the state she fell asleep in was slowly becoming the state she woke into. Second, consider persistence, because Neville taught that assumption is not a single event performed once, and abandoned the moment the outer world seems to contradict it. It is a discipline held over days and weeks, a garment you put back on every time it slips. And here is where most people fail. Not because the method does not work, but because they check the mailbox on day 3, see no change, and quietly conclude they were foolish to believe. So walk through an ordinary day the way persistence actually behaves inside it. In the morning you wake, and for 1 full minute before rising, you feel the relief of already having. The sheets still warm, the mind still soft. Mid-morning, an old worry about a bill rises uninvited, and instead of following it down into its familiar spiral, you gently return to the felt scene for a few seconds, then release it, and continue your work. At lunch, a friend mentions their own financial worry, and rather than matching their fear with your own, you quietly hold your assumption undisturbed within. Saying nothing aloud, needing to say nothing aloud. In the afternoon, an unexpected expense appears, and the old self would have spiraled into calculation and dread. But you pause, you breathe, and say inwardly, "This does not describe me anymore." Returning once more to the felt sense of already having. In the evening, tired, you catch yourself wanting to complain about the day, and instead you choose quiet. And at night, in that same drowsy borderland where the day began, you return once more to the one true feeling, that you already have what you have imagined. This is not one dramatic leap performed once in a burst of emotion. It is 100 small returns to the same assumption scattered across a single ordinary day. And it is this returning, this refusal to abandon the feeling, the moment evidence seems to disagree, that Neville called persistence. And he taught that persistence, far more than any single vivid moment of belief, is what presses the assumption down into the deep places of the mind, where it finally hardens into fact. Think of it the way a single drop of water means nothing against a stone, and yet 1,000 drops, falling in the same place over years, wear a hollow into rock that nothing else could touch. Your feeling, repeated nightly, is that same patient water, and the stubborn fact you once thought fixed is that same stone, softer than it appears. Third, consider that the outer world will often seem to argue with you before it ever agrees with you. The register may still come up short a while. The message may still not arrive on schedule. The bill may still land on the very day you were resting in abundance. And this is not failure. This is simply the old state dissolving on its way out, the way a fever sometimes rises just before it breaks. So when the silence from a client seems to say you were wrong to believe, do not let it recruit you back into the old assumption. Hold steady. Feel the end again. Sleep on it again. And let the days accumulate quietly, the way water accumulates behind a dam, unnoticed, until the moment it finally, undeniably, breaks through. Fourth, consider that this is not effort as the world understands effort. It asks for no straining, no gritted teeth, only a gentle, repeated returning, the way you return your gaze to a face you love, without being told to, simply because it is where your attention wants to rest. And when the assumption becomes that natural, that easy to return to, you will know it has already begun its quiet work beneath the surface of things, long before the outer world offers its first small sign. And this is why Neville pointed his listeners toward the hour before sleep, rather than some grand ritual performed at noon. Because the drowsy mind asks no questions, and simply receives. Plant the seed there, tend it there nightly, and let the noon hours of your life be free to simply live, unburdened by the very desire you have already entrusted to the deeper room within you. I persist in the feeling until it becomes the fact. The sixth key is, release the chase entirely and let the state itself do the work you once tried to do with striving. Neville taught that the very posture of chasing announces to your own consciousness that you do not yet have, and that announcement is more powerful than any amount of effort layered on top of it. Picture the difference between a person running down the street after a bus, breathless, straining, arms waving, and a person standing calmly at the stop, certain the bus is coming because the schedule says so. Both may end up riding the same bus, but only one of them boarded it in peace. This is the difference between the old way and the way Neville taught. Chasing money is running down the street after something you have already convinced yourself is pulling away from you, while assuming the feeling of already having is standing calmly at the stop, unbothered, because you know it is already on its way. And here is another picture, worth sitting with quietly. Think of a man who spends every evening refreshing job listings until midnight, sending out applications with trembling urgency, and think of another man who applies once, calmly, and then goes about his evening feeling already provided for, not from arrogance but from a settled knowing that he does not have to force the door open because the door was never truly shut. The second man is not lazier, he is simply not leaking his energy into the announcement of lack. He has stopped treating the object of his desire as prey that must be run down and cornered, and started treating it as something already moving quietly toward him. This does not mean you stop working. It does not mean you stop showing up. It means the striving loses its desperate edge. The work becomes something you do from fullness, rather than something you do to escape emptiness. Notice the difference in your own body when you reach for something out of fear versus when you reach for something out of certainty. The fearful reach is tight, quick, grasping. The certain reach is unhurried, open, almost playful, and it is this shift, subtle but total, that finally lets the thing you wanted stop feeling like prey and start feeling like something already yours, quietly making its way home. So this week, wherever you catch yourself grasping, pause, loosen the shoulders, loosen the grip, and simply remember, it is already on its way to me. Let that be the whole of your effort. This is the whole turn the title of this teaching pointed to from the very first line. Once you stop chasing money, it starts chasing you. Not because you tricked it, not because you outsmarted it, but because you finally stopped announcing its absence and started resting, quietly, fully, in its presence. I release the chase and let it find me instead. Here is the whole picture. It is not the how you needed, it was the feeling. It is not the world's fault. It was the self-concept quietly agreeing with lack. It is not other people withholding. It was your own state pushed outward and met again at the door. It is not the sting of the day that needed forgetting. It was the scene that needed revising before sleep sealed it in. It is not one dramatic leap of faith that changes a life. It is persistence, returning again and again to the same quiet feeling until the mind can no longer tell the difference between imagination and memory. And it is not chasing that ever brought anything worth having. It is resting in the end already claimed, and when you see it this way, you see that all 6 keys were never 6 separate teachings, they were 6 turns of one single key, and that one key is this: money is not a thing you hunt in the world, it is a state you occupy in imagination, and the outer world, faithful as gravity, simply agrees. If you are ready to stop practicing this in flashes and start living it as a daily discipline, the 21-day reality shift was built exactly for that. 21 mornings and nights walking you gently through assumption, revision, and the state akin to sleep, so that living in the end becomes less like remembering and more like breathing. It is available now for a small one-time investment, with a full refund if it does not serve you. And you will find the link waiting in the description below. Say it with me one final time. I am the source of my own supply. I already possess everything I have imagined. Imagination creates my reality. And so it is settled, quietly, in the one place it was always meant to be settled, within you. Stop chasing, rest instead, and watch how quickly it starts chasing you.